Welcome to episode 2 of the Courageous Coach podcast where we pull back the curtain on what it really takes to be courageous with your clients, your business, and your life. I'm your host, Melissa Haigh. In this episode, I'm joined by Amy Wilkinson, coach, entrepreneur, and founder of Fearless Foodies. We discuss the challenges of navigating vulnerability and how Amy's experiences with burnout shaped her approach to coaching. We explore the themes of self-belief, courage, and authenticity, and chat about the importance of community, the challenges of imposter syndrome, and the necessity of self-compassion in personal growth. So, are you ready? Let's dive in. Welcome, Amy. Welcome to the Courageous Coach podcast. It's so lovely to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honour and a privilege.
Bless you. And welcome to everyone listening as well, of course. So let's start, Amy, with tell us a little bit about you.
Okay. How long you got? I've already warned you, haven't I? I like to talk. So I am a coach. I am what else am I? I'm a business owner. I'm a mother. Lots and lots of different things. But I guess one of the things that feels like it really fits well with talking about courageous coaching is that I'm the founder of a company called Fearless Foodies. So my backstory is 20 odd-ish years, always worked in food manufacturing. So, the people behind what you see in the supermarkets. Yeah. So worked across loads and loads of different functions within that. And then back in 2020, when the pandemic hit, I was in a marketing role in the food industry and I was furloughed. And I'm not going to lie, it stabbed a little bit that I wasn't needed at the time. But what it did do was give me time and space to think about what I wanted to do next in my career. And I think I'd always because I've worked across lots and lots of different things, I'm somebody that gets quite, bored's not the right word, but I'm interest-led in everything that I do. So I need to stay interested in what I'm doing. I've always moved around a lot and I kind of always given myself a bit of a hard time for that. But actually at the time I wasn't a coach. I hadn't had any coach training, but I had experience of coaching about 10 years before that, maybe a little bit less, of some health coaching because I'd suffered burnout. So I kind of knew some stuff about coaching techniques and stuff like that. And I did a lot of work on what is it that I enjoy doing? What are my values? All of that sort of stuff. And realised that the common thread through everything that I'd ever done in the food industry was I loved helping other people and developing other people and seeing other people shine and giving them that leg up. So I went and qualified as a coach. So did a 6-month coaching course and started coaching people one-to-one. So it was all under Amy Wilkinson coaching at the time. And at that time, if I'm honest, I was like, never working in the food industry again. They're dead to me. It's done. And I reckon there's probably quite a lot of coaches that kind of have been through that journey that end up sort of feeling like that a little bit, because it's often a second career and you're kind of like, I ain't ever doing that again. But actually, I think through conversations, through all the coaching I was doing, because naturally I started coaching people that worked in the food industry because they were people I knew, and then it was friends of friends and all of that sort of stuff, was actually a few things. I can actually help affect change in this industry. So that was like a one thing. I actually do love it and I have a passion for it. It's just there are areas of it that are really, really difficult. Well, but I can help and I can do something about that. And I've managed to escape. So I need to help all these people that are still stuck there, kind of thing. That was like the thought process that went on. So that was 20 back end of 2020. So just over 4 years ago. It worked and I built a business on the back of it. And the first year was hard. And I was really only doing one-to-one coaching. And then I was approached to do some group work. And in my pattern, and obviously like the old imposter syndrome came out and was like, I can't do that. Why could, you know, and then when I look back at my career, yeah, you know, I could stand on a stage, I could hold a room, I could herd cats, because I had to do all of that in my corporate career. I was like, actually, I do have some of these skills around groups, and, you know, I'd had that feedback from people. So I upskilled myself some more and started doing a bit of group coaching, a bit of training around communication skills, sort of bringing in my own personal experience and knowledge, having worked across loads of different functions, and was like, actually, I could create a course on that, or I could do a workshop on that.
Okay.
And so over time, the business built, I rebranded it as Fearless Foodies, because I kind of was properly staked back in the ground. Yeah, okay, I'm not leaving the food industry. This is it.
This is it. Yeah.
And I did that in January 2024, rebranded it as Fearless Foodies, and it's gone exponential from my perspective, you know, from a one woman band to having a team of associate coaches around me, because I've identified I need that to grow. And I've kind of taken a real switch in my mindset of, oh, I'm just going to go and be a coach and do a little bit of coaching, to I'm going to, you know, that is still really important to me. But it feels like now my mission is, I am a founder of a movement, and I'm going to do something to change an industry. That's, you know, like, it's quite a big difference, and that's taken 4 years.
Yeah. It's funny, because I think every coach you speak to, right, will tell you that the reason that they became a coach is because they like to help people. They you know, like people. And you said that, but it's become more than that for you. It's not just helping, you know, an individual one-to-one coaching. You're taking on a whole industry now, right?
Yeah.
That's quite I'm not going to say it's unusual, but it's quite the step, right?
Yeah.
You've stepped up, I guess.
Yeah. And it's not been overnight. And it's been, and I think part of it is born out of frustration, in that, you know, I started on that one-to-one journey, and there are people, there are businesses I've worked with that, you know, now 4 years on, I probably wouldn't work with now, knowing what I know, or I would work with them in a different capacity, where this frustration inside me, where it's like, there's only so much I can help this individual, or I can help with their mindset challenges. The system is the problem, you know, like there's, and therefore the wider system needs change, not just the individual, I think has been that kind of light bulb moment for me.
Yeah. But look, here's the thing. Again, I hear that, and I'm like, yeah, I absolutely, I mean, as you know, I'm mainly a leadership coach, and I experience that you know, across a number of different industries where, you know, you're working one-to-one, you know, this person really wants to change. They really want to do things differently, you know, but they get back out into their real world, and the system around them is not allowing for that change.
Yeah.
But I also know that, so my mission when I think about the coaching work I do is I say one leader at a time, because I can't take on the world. I just, so to listen to you, you're taking on the world. And I'm like, wow, that's courageous. Does it feel courageous to you to be doing that?
Yeah, it feels, I'm not going to lie, it feels scary, and it feels exhausting sometimes. So it is still doing it one person at a time. But I think, and it's not, and I think this is where, you know, when you asked me who I was, like, I am a coach, but I'm also a founder of a movement. Like, it's not all coaching. And things like, so I have a podcast called the O for Food's Sake podcast, which I co-host with a really good friend of mine. And that's where we can have some of the difficult conversations. Like, I can, obviously, with pure confidentiality and stuff, but all of the stuff that I hear behind closed doors, those common themes, I can talk about it out loud and be like, the people are not the problem, the system's the problem, you know, like I've got that platform. And I think that's part of what's happened over time. Like, I never wanted to, because I think a big part of the being courageous was getting visible, which I know a lot of coaches struggle with. Like,
Absolutely.
we just want to coach people. We don't want to have to like talk about what we do or
it's
any
icky.
of that. Yeah, exactly. Whereas actually, I'm quite extroverted. I don't mind standing up on a stage. You know, put me at a networking event and I would much rather be on the stage than having to make small talk in the crowd. Like, that's just who I am and how I work. And I think over the last 4 years, I've recognised that in myself. And I quite enjoy creating content and marketing, because the last 6 years of my corporate career was marketing products, cream cakes and pizzas and stuff like that, but not, you know, it's very different marketing yourself. But that bit of courage of putting myself out there, it's almost like once you feel like you've got that platform and people are listening to you, I don't want to waste that opportunity. Like, people are looking to me because, and I think there's being able to be straight talking and talk about some of the issues in the industry. And like you say, they're not just food industry wise, but it's my, you know, that's my specialism.
Yeah.
People say to me, "Oh, you're so courageous, you're so brave." And I'm like, well, I wouldn't, you know, if I'm honest, I wouldn't have done it while I was still in a job. I wouldn't have done it when I was employed. And it's almost like that privilege of self-employment, of being your own boss. I can say the things that other people aren't willing to say out loud. And and what I've found is the more honest and raw I am about those things, the bigger the impact is. Also avoiding the word authentic because I hate it.
Yeah. But raw, real.
Yeah.
You know, which I guess many people would say, well, that is about authenticity, right? But okay, so in talking about raw and real, I can't help but make the link to vulnerability there, right? Because it's vulnerable to be raw and real. And so people, you know, who are, as you say, still employed inside inside these organizations, it's often incredibly vulnerable and actually also often not safe for them to speak up in the way that you're now able to, right? So maybe it feels safer, but I still hear vulnerability in that for you. So how do you lean into that vulnerability to speak up, or what do you sense of that vulnerability?
I think it's an interesting one on the vulnerability thing, because I think I'm always really conscious of vulnerability, and I've loved Brené Brown for forever, since I discovered her probably however many years ago, and her talking about vulnerability and stuff, and being really conscious of not tipping over into that overshare space of like it not really being vulnerability. I'm really conscious of it. And part of that is I am an oversharer, right? So, and in the past, it has got me in trouble because I'm too honest. And I don't mean honest in a I'm brutal with other people. I'm probably more almost too honest about my shortfalls and stuff like that. Or, you know, what's the word? Self-deprecating and all of that sort of stuff. But what I think the learning for me over the last few years has been getting that balance right. So vulnerability with boundaries. And, you know, a big part of when things started to change for me in my business. So before it became Fearless Foodies, but when I started to grow more of a following, I guess you would call it. See, self-deprecating. I can't say it out loud, but I have quite a lot of people following me. I started talking publicly about the fact that I suffered burnout, and this was back in 2012. And the first time I spoke about it publicly was not really that public at all. It was somebody I'd met asked me to talk in their Facebook group and do a little talk about it. And I did a little talk about it, and it was only a few people, and it really resonated. And I was like, you know, those light bulb moments where you're like, oh, the crap stuff that happened to me, it could be really helpful to other people to hear about that. Maybe I need to talk about that more. But then for the next so I did do quite a lot of keynote speaking about burnout and telling my story of burnout, which felt super vulnerable. And sometimes it made me feel ill. I'm not going to lie. Like, I'd come back from those events and it was almost like revisiting that past trauma almost. Well, almost it was. So what I have learned is that you've got to have those boundaries in place. So I don't talk about that as much because I know that it was draining me, but I am vulnerable. I am willing to talk about my shortfalls. I'm willing to talk about the crap stuff, but I always have boundaries around it.
So look, this is so important, isn't it? Because one of the questions that I get asked all the time, leaders and coaches, is, vulnerability, that's sharing your stuff. Leaders will ask me, oh God, do I have to let it all hang out? Should I cry more? Those kind of questions. And coaches will say, well, yeah, but it's not about me. It's about them. It's not about me sharing my stuff. That doesn't feel right. And what you've touched on there, I think, is that there's a very real difference between sharing something that's difficult and vulnerable for you in order so that you're working your own stuff out, right? And sharing it because it's going to move the work, whatever that work is, forward in some way. So as a coach, it's going to help your client, right? It's going to help move them forward. So I think it's so important, isn't it? We have to do our own work. We've got to work our own stuff out. And that's not done in the coaching space as the coach or indeed as the leader with their team. That's done elsewhere, therapist, coaching, mentoring, whatever it might be. But that doesn't mean that we can't share in service of the work that we do, right? Yeah, with boundaries, as you say.
Yeah. And I think if I think like right into a one-to-one coaching conversation, with real sort of classic training, like when you're really green and you're like, well, I cannot bring anything about myself into the coaching space. Everything's got to be clean language and da-da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
And I've learned over time, particularly because of the way I present myself online and stuff, people want the benefit of my hindsight and my experience. And actually, whether that then is, I'm putting my mentoring hat on, or there might be times where, like you say, it's in service of the client to share something about that's happened in the past, or actually, something like that happened to me 10 years ago, blah, 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 without holding anything that they, got to take anything from it. I think that, it's not helpful. So for instance, in the last 18 months, I've had an ADHD diagnosis, and part of the reason I identified it in myself was because I had clients who were coming and they were getting diagnoses, and what they were talking about, I was like, oh my God, that is me. Not helpful for me to have sat in those sessions and gone, oh my God, that's me too, and like, how do you do that? Like, and that's the difference, isn't it? That's not it's knowing when it's right and when it's not right to share that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas now, 18 months on, and having had therapy, had the diagnosis, had loads of work, if somebody came to me and said, I know you've got ADHD, could, what do you find useful? Like, I feel in a better place to be able to share that and it be in service of them, not
not
service
about
of
you.
me. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And of course, ultimately, when we share something of ourselves, that's when we create connection with our clients, right? Which is where the real magic of coaching really happens, you know, and we have all of these skills that we develop. Yes, the listening and great questioning and presence and empathy and totally. But all of those things are skills which enable us to create connection. And it can be so tempting to lean heavily on those skills and forget that actually part of connection is about it's two humans in conversation with each other who need to build connection as human beings, right?
And not trying to be too clever with it, right? Because that's the other thing, isn't it? It's like when you truly are just creating a connection and it's like I have conversations with friends and they might make a comment about me coaching them, and I'm like genuinely not in the coaching space in my head or anything about it. It's just like, that is, like I'm just curious. So I'm really, really wanting to ask those questions or whatever. It's just, it's a special place, isn't it? But you do, and I do think there is, having had a lot of coaching myself, I can see the difference between when you are sort of just being coached by a textbook way of doing it than versus that connection.
Yeah, totally. Yes, and it becomes a very different relationship, and where you're prepared to go, how many layers of the onion you're prepared to peel back, and all of those things changes based on the quality of that connection, right? How far you're prepared to go, how safe you feel, all of those things. Yeah. I'm really curious because, you know, you've mentioned Brené. Obviously, we've done, you know, courage building work together and, you know, using Brené's work. And so what I'm wondering about is, you know, in the last 4 years, which as an outsider looking in, I'm like, you know, I see huge courage and vulnerability and also I also feel a sense of pride, and I don't know why, because it's not my thing, but there is like
you should, Melissa.
But
You've definitely been part of it.
Well,
so
it's
own
just
it.
like you grabbed it and you know, you went for it almost into the unknown, and you saw something and went for it, and I really admire that. And so I'm wondering about what's the sort of a sense of you, because I think we can all talk about being courageous. We all know the word, right? But for you and I, you know, we've done work around developing our courage and building those courage building skills and learning about ourselves and our courage and vulnerabilities. So I'm wondering if you have a sense of like a before and after, you know, what difference has it made being sort of deliberate in that development of your courage?
It's a really good question, as in there's lots in the answer, I think. I would say I am much more willing to have difficult conversations. So definitely before all of this work and still forevermore working on it, always the people pleaser, always appeasing situations. And now being able to see the benefit of being brave and saying what you really mean, and having those moments where it feels really freaking uncomfortable to say what you're going to say, and then straight afterwards there's that total relief. Like and when I look back and I think about like I mentioned my burnout, which was a long time ago now, 13 years ago, part of that, with all the hindsight that I've got, was that I didn't have the courage to say no, and I didn't have the courage to push back, and I was holding all these emotions inside and workload and everything because I wasn't courageous enough, I guess, to say no, that's not acceptable, or all of that sort of stuff. And it made me ill, and you know, and I've got chronic illness that I will have for life as a result of that. So I think now, and I don't think any of us are ever, like, it's never done, is it, the work?
Oh, never.
I say that, you know, when you get a new coaching client and, you know, they're like 2 sessions in, then they're like, oh my God. And you're like, oh no, sorry, this is it for life now. Open the self-development box. It will never be closed.
No, absolutely. Yeah, unfortunately, you're never done.
But what I think now is I have more faith in myself, and the faith that it's okay to speak up, it's okay to be different, it's okay to it's almost that I just keep going back to the word courage. It is just it's self-belief, I guess. I think that is what I have got from doing the work around courage. And interesting, like, I'm just thinking about, we did you didn't call it a retreat, did you?
Gathering.
A gathering. I don't like authentic, you don't like the word retreat, but and you've got another one coming up, and it's in my diary as retreat. Sorry, Melissa, I'll change it to gathering. But things like that, where I was in a sorry, you might want to edit some of this out because I'm like totally babbling now.
Okay.
I think being able to be brave enough in that space with a load of other coaches, because I still have this imposter of like, I think I'm a really good marketeer and I'm a really good business owner, but am I a good coach? Mm-hmm. Yes, I am. But, you know, I still have all of those moments, and being able to be, to say out loud what it is I want, and for that to be okay is a massive step forward from who I was 5 or 10 years ago, for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, sorry.
No, I was thinking about, you know, as you mentioned the gathering, I was thinking about, you know, I remember we talked about it at the time, you know, you made a very conscious choice, I think, about how you wanted to show up in that space, and that it was different from how you might have shown up in other groups, particularly other groups of coaches.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that again, other people have said to me as well, and I know I experienced this as well, is that when often in groups of coaches, when groups of coaches come together, you know, in kind of any kind of way, whether that's networking or learning or whatever, there is this sense of kind of competitiveness, or am I enough, or oh, they've been doing it for much longer than me, and you know, and that sort of need to prove oneself, maybe, or to be the, you know, say the right thing, the people pleaser, right? Not upset anyone, not step out of line, not suggest that you gave advice last week because you might get thrown out of the group, you know, those sorts of things. There's a lot of that. And so there's something really special for me when we find a group, and the gathering is a good example, but there are, you know, other groups as well where we find that group of coaches where that just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Right. And those groups are to be treasured, right? Because it isn't, I don't think it's the norm, interestingly.
No, I don't. I think you're absolutely right. And I mean, I feel like I shouldn't be saying this on a podcast that coaches are going to be listened to, but I think there can be quite a bit of snobbery in the industry, and I struggle with that. And you know, for whatever, you know, I'm so sure it's something from my childhood, because it usually is, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you know, I'm like, are you good at what you do? Do you have the best of intentions? That's good enough for me. And some people aren't like that. You know, there's the
totally.
And actually, it's interesting what you were saying about at the gathering. So what I did was I wasn't as bubbly and as outwardly extroverted as I normally am. I took myself away a lot, which is not like me at all. But what on the last day we had like a coaching session that was around, and I think I used the term something like am I going to go big or go home? Like I was like, am I basically going to stay as a freelance coach, or am I going to make this Fearless Foodies thing the big thing that it is? And here we are a year later, and it's exploded.
And absolutely.
I decided to go big.
Yeah. Well, you decided to go big, and it's gone big. I mean, it's not even like you just decided. You decided and you did it, and it's gone big, right? Which is just phenomenal. And I wonder, you know, as you kind of, because we've, you know, it's been a long journey, but particularly around, you know, getting to this point with Fearless Foodies, it's been that kind of, I think 4 years, you said, right?
Yeah.
Since it kind of really started to percolate and develop and grow. And so I'm super curious about what's next. But I'm curious about what's next in terms of, you know, what are you stepping into your courage now, right? Where is that? What's the call to courage that you're leaning into now as we move into the next, maybe, I don't know, year or maybe even 4 years?
Yeah. I don't know. I do. Well, and that is, I think part of all of this courage for me has been able to accept that I am a person that is interest based, and this is, you know, I mentioned my ADHD diagnosis and all of that, so that I'm not very good. No, that's not true. See, I still catch myself all the time. I'm not motivated by planning lots of stuff in ahead and stuff like that. So for me, those moments of courage come up when I least expect them. And that's, and I will identify them as they come along. Having said that, I'm always reading a book, listening to books, because I like listening to books. And I'm listening to The Big Leap at the moment.
Okay.
Gay Hendricks or something like that. Yeah, Gay Hendricks. And he talks about this upper limit problem. So basically that everybody, when you get to a level of success, starts to self-sabotage. And I think there's a risk in that for me. So I've gone big and it's going well. And we all have this kind of looking over our shoulder going, well, something's going to go wrong, isn't it? And we create that ourselves. So I'm really enjoying listening to that at the minute. So I think for me, it's going to be about identifying what my next upper limit is that I'm going to start. Like when we were talking about that go big, go home, it was kind of, am I going to take more associates on so that I can do more work and stuff like that? So that was kind of my limiting, it's about limiting beliefs, I guess. Yeah. But my limit was, I've only got so much capacity. Okay, how do I break through that? So I think as that starts to settle down, in this year, I'm going to start identifying what is my next ceiling that I'm going to need to start pushing through, so that I'm always pushing through that upper limit. Okay. And this isn't about business growth or money or any of those things. It's how I limit myself as an individual.
I love that idea of upper limit. Actually, I like that language, right? Because I think we get caught up in goals and plans and what are my objectives for 2025. Just makes me feel very corporate, very bored, and I'm like, so there's something about finding your way of doing it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And not falling into the trap of, I've got to have a strategy, because of course everyone says that I have to. And, because it's not like you say, that doesn't float your boat. It's not going to excite you.
Yeah. And it's not that I'm winging it, because I'm not. But I think it's about working with the way I work. Yeah. has been what has unlocked a lot of stuff. And I think that in itself takes courage, because it's admitting I can't do everything and I need help with these things. And actually I'm not perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You can do anything, but not everything.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And so, I mean, that brings us right back round to this idea that knowing yourself is critical, right? Yes, as a coach, as a business owner, as the founder of a movement, this idea of knowing yourself and what's right and best for you is super important, but also recognizing that flexes and changes as we go through life. What worked last year might not work this year, and that's okay too, right? Yeah, totally. And I'm absolutely stealing interest-led. I've not heard the term before, and I'm stealing it because I'm from a generation. Well, maybe it's just me. Maybe it's not my generation. I don't. Where it was not okay to be bored. If I told my mum I was bored, I'd have probably very swiftly received metaphorical clip.
Only bored people get bored.
Yes, exactly. It was not okay.
Only boring. You're so boring. Yeah.
But I like that interest-led. That's that, because there's something about what we're drawn to, that the work that we're drawn to do is important. I think particularly when you're self-employed, that's what keeps you going, right?
Yeah, and I think it's interest and that intuition, like that. There's always the latest thing that you're into, isn't there? Like, what element of psychology am I into this week, or self-development or whatever. But I always I am a little bit spiritual and a little bit woo. And I kind of think the universe leads you where you need to be at that moment in time. So actually, there's a reason why that's popped up on your Instagram stories, or you've seen that book somewhere or something. So actually just go with it.
Trust your gut, trust your intuition. Yeah. Love it.
But you have to have that. That's what I was talking about, that kind of self-belief when you do that, because you're trusting in something that isn't solid.
Yes. Okay, so if someone, if someone is listening to us now and thinking, yes, absolutely, but I don't think I've got that level of self-belief, right? And I think sometimes when we look at someone like yourself, right, who's done the work and has done the development, we can kind of yearn for that, but not understand how to fill the gaps. So what would you offer people who are perhaps, they want to do some work on their self-belief? What are some of the things they might think about doing?
And it's funny because when you were saying that and I was playing it back, I was thinking, am I not lying? What's the word? Like yesterday, right? This is it. Because if there are people thinking that, I want to do this reality thing.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I just had a really crappy day, and like I won't go into the reasons because we don't need the overshare of all the reasons why. But I lay on my sister's sofa, and she was on the other sofa, pretty much all day, and didn't do any of the things that I'd planned to do or wanted to do, and I didn't have any self-belief yesterday. And I think there's something in the understanding the human condition, and that none of us are ever totally bossing it all the time or totally feeling great about ourselves, and knowing that doesn't make you some sort of weirdo or different to everybody. And I think this is the privilege we have as coaches, right? Because we hear this from our clients as well. Absolutely. And you start to realise that everyone has the same thoughts and feelings a lot of generally, that actually being okay with having days where you don't feel like you're bossing it on top of the world is a good thing. But I think, which didn't really hasn't answered your question, but I just felt like I needed to say that because I don't want people thinking, because like literally if you'd seen me yesterday, like hair slapped back, no makeup on, like feeling like, the end of the world. And I think it's important that people know that successful people have ups and downs and bad days. But I think what I have done that does help me with my self-belief is I do really make a conscious effort to reflect and to celebrate successes, every single tiny little success. Right. And I'm rubbish at it, but I still force myself to do it. So you'll have seen on social media, I've got a journal called the To-Do List book. Yeah. And I published it on Amazon a couple of years ago because it's what I needed and what I ended up doing back in 2020. So it was a real, I've sort of really like skated over it, but it was a tough time for most people in lockdown. But I got COVID really badly for a good few weeks, had a bit of long COVID, had a bad back, had an 18-month-old to look at. Like there was a lot going on, and then I come out the other end of it. I've trained to be a coach as well, and that took daily mindset work, right? Of really journaling, looking for every glimmer in the day of what I had achieved or what I was grateful for, and all of that sort of stuff. And I go back to it whenever I need it now. And it's just that it's gathering the evidence. And I think it's different for everybody, right? But for me, having some evidence written down or talked about with people around me is like, oh yeah, I am actually quite good at what I do.
Yeah, I did all right today, right? Yeah. I think this is super interesting because there's two things that I'm kind of reminded of is that, and it sort of links to your point around it's very easy for us to look at people who we perceive to be further along their journey than us and think that they've got everything worked out, right? Mm-hmm. And that allows us then the room to beat ourselves up because we're not there too, or we don't know how we're going to get there, or we're all a bit lost and muddled, right? Yeah. And so there's two things in what you said, I think. The first thing is that this idea that this isn't something that you can just, I don't know, read a book or journal for a week and flick a switch. This is daily practice, being deliberate about it, even when it's hard, even when you don't like doing it, but being really committed to that daily kind of practice. And then the other thing that really triggered for me when you were talking there, in response to my question, which was such a lovely response, is this: it felt to me like self-belief, or your self-belief, goes hand in hand with your self-compassion. The two, it felt like the two exist together.
They do now.
They do now. Yes, absolutely. They do now. And many people will be thinking, oh, I'm not there yet. Right.
Yeah.
And so on those days when we, like you say, spend the day on the sofa and or we're just not feeling at our best, or we don't achieve what we set out to. It's that ability to give ourselves self-compassion, not to feel better, but to recognize that we're struggling. And that's okay. Right.
Yeah.
That's okay. And also lovely to hear you talk about, and other people are struggling as well, just like I am, which is also self-compassion, because that's common humanity rather than I'm alone, I'm the only one.
Yeah.
Super interested in that. I really heard, here's my self-belief, but here alongside that is my ability to also offer myself self-compassion.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Yeah. And I think that has been a lot of the work that I've done this last year. Because we did talk about the work of Christian Neff and fierce self-compassion. Yeah. I think that was my route into learning more about self-compassion, was actually it doesn't have to. Do you know what? I used to think self-compassion was like you put it in the same bucket as self-care and candlelit baths and all that rubbish.
And fluffy. Rubbish. Yeah.
Doesn't feel like somebody fearless would have all of that, when actually knowing that self-compassion is also standing up for yourself and is also saying, do you know what, I'm not well enough, I'm not in the right state today to I'm not going to do a good enough job for my clients, I'm going to cancel them. Like that actually takes bravery and self-compassion for the right reasons.
Yeah, totally.
So I think it again, and I'll give you some credit for that, Melissa, again, because you helped me. I think that's been a big theme for at least the last 6 months, has been like, actually, I've really got to work on that. And part of that for me, because of the chronic health issues I've got, because of the burnout I had, is that I have created more space in my working week so that I can be more self-compassionate, because all those years in the corporate world of like you back-to-back meetings, it's very, very hard to have any time to even know how you're feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it becomes habit, and it and therefore it is daily practice, right, to break that habit. Yeah. So, Amy, I'm curious, as we kind of come to close the session, I'm closing all of the sessions, all of the conversations with this question. I'm always curious, what's the one thing that you think every coach should know about courage?
I think the most courageous thing is to be yourself, which sounds very, I don't know, counterintuitive, but it's having the courage to go beyond the coaching models that you've learned, all of that stuff, bring the courage to bring yourself into the coaching space is like the secret sauce that unlocks things for people.
Yeah. I love that. As you already know, and listeners are going to learn, is that, I'm like 100%. Right? This is the next level. This is, come on, this is you. This is bringing your humanity. But recognizing that requires us to be courageous, right? Definitely.
And to constantly be doing the work and to constantly like accept that part of that is being imperfect.
Yeah. Messy and imperfect. Yeah. Totally. Amy, thank you so much for joining me today. I've loved our conversation, as I knew I would. But thank you. It's been a real pleasure to chat with you. Take good care.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to the show. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. You can visit my website, melissahaig.com, to find out more about the work I do to help coaches like you be more courageous with their clients, their business, and their lives.